You think dating an older woman is easier, less drama, more maturity, clearer communication, no games, no endless back and forth, just two people who know what they want. That is the fantasy. And sometimes, for a brief window, it feels true. The conversations are different. The emotional volatility that younger relationships often produce seems absent. There is a calm, a directness, a feeling of finally being with someone who has their life together. But there is a reality most men discover too late. Age changes leverage. Experience changes dynamics. What felt like maturity can quickly become something else. Something that puts you at a structural disadvantage you did not see coming. Today, you will understand the psychological and structural realities, the actual mechanics, the power shifts, the hidden expectations, and by the end, you will know exactly what you are walking into. An older woman usually has more relational experience than you, not just more relationships, more relational experience. She has been through the cycles. She has seen the patterns. She has dated men who said one thing and did another. She has learned through direct experience what works and what does not, what to tolerate and what not to tolerate. Pattern recognition. This is the first advantage experience provides. She has seen your type before, the category you fit into, the language you use, the way you pursue, the emotional rhythms you operate on, and she knows how those patterns typically unfold. She is reading you in ways you may not even be reading yourself. She is 3 steps ahead, and that pattern recognition gives her a predictive capacity you do not have. Emotional calibration. The second advantage. She has learned to manage her own emotional responses in ways that younger women often have not. She is not going to spiral over delayed text. She has calibrated her emotional system to operate more efficiently, less reactive, more controlled. And that calibration is an advantage because it means she is operating from a more stable emotional position. Boundary enforcement. This is where the experience gap becomes most visible. She knows what her boundaries are. She has spent years figuring out what she will and will not accept, and she enforces those boundaries without guilt or hesitation. If you cross a line, you will know. And if you cross it repeatedly, you will be out. She has less tolerance for uncertainty, for ambiguity, for a man who does not know what he wants. Innocence versus experience, exploration versus selectivity. When you are younger, relationships involve exploration. You are figuring out what you want. You are learning through trial and error. But she is past that phase. She is not exploring, she is selecting. She knows what she wants. She has criteria, and you either meet them or you do not. There is no prolonged period of figuring it out together. The evaluation is faster and more definitive. Experience shifts negotiating power. The person with more relational experience has more leverage in the dynamic because they have more information. They know what to look for. They know what typically happens next. They know when to invest and when to walk away. And unless you have equivalent experience, you are operating at a structural disadvantage, not because she is manipulating you, but because she simply knows more about how this works than you do. Now let us go to the biological and evolutionary layer. Because age does not just bring experience, it brings a shift in priorities that is driven, at least in part, by biology. And understanding this shift is critical to understanding why the dynamic feels different. Time pressure changes strategy. A woman in her early 20s has time to explore, time to date casually. But a woman in her 30s or 40s is operating under a different calculus. If she wants children, the biological window is closing or is closed. If she does not want children, she still operates with the awareness that time is finite, and wasting it on relationships that go nowhere is a cost she is less willing to absorb. Age affects long-term planning urgency. The older someone gets, the more urgently they think about long-term outcomes, not because they are desperate, but because they are realistic. And whether that investment will produce a long-term outcome becomes relevant much sooner. Stability preference increases. As people age, their preference for stability increases. The appeal of unpredictability diminishes, and the appeal of consistency increases, which means traits that might have been attractive in a younger man, spontaneity, unstructured ambition, become less attractive. And traits that signal stability, clear direction, financial responsibility, emotional steadiness, become more attractive. Clarity about desired outcomes sharpens. The older someone gets, the more clearly they know what they want. And that clarity makes them more selective, less willing to compromise on things that matter. If you are dating an older woman, you are dealing with someone who has developed a specific picture of what a functional relationship looks like for her. And you either fit that picture or you do not. There is less flexibility. Priorities evolve with life stage. She has been through enough relationships to know what she needs, and she is not willing to pretend she does not need it. You may be exploring, trying to figure out what you want. She may be optimizing, using years of information to make decisions that maximize getting what she actually wants. Exploring and optimizing are fundamentally different modes. And when those modes collide, friction is inevitable. This brings us to the expectation gap. And this is where most men who date older women encounter the first serious structural problem. You want growth and experimentation. She may want stability and certainty. And those two things, while not mutually exclusive, often pull in opposite directions. Future planning conversations happen early. When dating someone your own age, conversations about the future happen gradually. But with an older woman, they happen much sooner. Not because she is pressuring you, but because she needs to know if you are aligned. Children, marriage, 5-year plans. These are evaluative questions asked early because she does not have the time to invest in something fundamentally misaligned. Emotional clarity demands. The older woman is less likely to tolerate emotional ambiguity. She wants to know how you feel. Now, are you interested in something serious? Are you emotionally available? Are you capable of the kind of intimacy she is looking for? She wants clear, direct, honest answers. The younger approach of letting things unfold naturally feels like avoidance to her. Like a man who is not sure what he wants, and that is a waste of time. Reduce tolerance for ambiguity. This extends beyond just future planning and emotional clarity. She insists on clarity, on defining things, on making expectations explicit. And if you are used to relationships where things are more fluid, this can feel controlling. Misaligned timelines create friction. If you are in a growth phase, still figuring out your career, still exploring who you are, and she is in an optimization phase, clear on her goals, established, the friction is structural. It is about being in fundamentally different life stages with fundamentally different priorities. And unless one of you is willing to adjust, the relationship will feel like constant negotiation. Now, let us talk about communication, because this is one of the areas where the difference between dating older and dating younger becomes most immediately visible. Older women often communicate directly. Not all of them, but many of them. They have learned that indirect communication, hinting, Implying, expecting you to read between the lines, rarely produces the outcomes they want. And so they have shifted to a more direct style, and they expect you to do the same. Older women often communicate directly, and they expect you to do the same. This can feel intense if you are used to relationships where communication is softer, more tentative. This directness can feel harsh. It can feel like criticism. But from her perspective, she is just being efficient. This can feel confrontational, especially if you were raised in an environment where conflict avoidance was the norm. Direct communication, if you are not used to it, can feel aggressive even when it is not. It can feel like an attack when it is actually just clarity. And if you respond to that clarity as though it is an attack, defensively, emotionally, the dynamic will degrade quickly. But this directness is also efficient. Problems get addressed when they are small rather than festering. Expectations are made clear rather than assumed. Needs are communicated rather than left unspoken. The direct communication style that can initially feel harsh is, in many cases, the thing that allows the relationship to function at a higher level. Contrast the younger dynamic. Younger relationships often involve more emotional flexibility, more tolerance for miscommunication. The communication style is often softer, more exploratory. That style has advantages. It creates space for growth, for change. But it also creates space for misunderstanding, for unmet expectations, for the slow accumulation of resentment over things never directly addressed. Clarity feels harsh if you are used to ambiguity. But harshness and clarity are not the same thing. And what many men interpret as harshness when dating older women is actually just the absence of the softening language they are used to. It is information delivered directly, and learning to receive direct information without interpreting it as an emotional attack is one of the core skills required. Now let us go to leverage, because age shifts dating market dynamics in ways that are real and need to be understood clearly. In some contexts, she may value youth. Youth signals energy, vitality, potential. Your youth must come with something else: competence, direction, confidence, emotional control. If your youth is just youth, if it is associated with immaturity, lack of direction, emotional instability, then it is not an asset. It is a liability. You may value experience, and that can be genuinely attractive. But the valuation is conditional. Her experience is only an asset if it is not accompanied by bitterness, rigidity, or emotional baggage she has not processed. But leverage depends on more than just age. Can you navigate the spaces she occupies without being intimidated? Can you contribute something to her life that justifies the time and energy she is investing? It depends on your confidence. Are you attracted to her because she is exceptional or because she is available? It depends on your resources, not just financial resources, but emotional resources, social resources, intellectual resources. What are you bringing that makes you a peer rather than a project? And it depends on your emotional control. Can you hold frame when she tests you? And she will? Or do you collapse into neediness or aggression? Here's the rule. Attraction is contextual, not automatic. The age gap does not create attraction on its own. It creates a context in which attraction is possible if the other variables align. This brings us to something that most men who date older women are not prepared for: the authority test. This is real. This happens, and understanding it is critical. The first question: what is her long-term intention? Not what you hope it is. What is it? Does she want to get married? Does she want children? These are necessary questions. Decision making, constantly seeking approval signals, not being ready to lead. This is critical. If you are attracted to her experience, if her competence, her confidence, her clarity genuinely appeal to you, that is a good sign. It means you see her strengths as assets. But if you are intimidated, if her competence makes you feel inadequate, if her confidence makes you insecure, that is a bad sign. The dynamic is already producing a power imbalance that is not working in your favor. The fourth question, like someone whose opinion matters, whose perspective is valued, like someone whose inexperience is obvious, whose contributions are dismissed or patronized, if you feel subordinate, the relationship is not going to work. Never enter a dynamic blindly. Ask the questions. Do the evaluation. Be honest about what you find. Because entering a relationship hoping it will work out, hoping that love will overcome structural misalignment, hoping that your feelings will bridge gaps that are real and significant, that is not optimism. That is denial. And denial, in the context of relationships, is just delayed pain. Older women may subconsciously test your leadership, but because competence matters more with age. When you are younger, you can get away with not having your life together. People give you the benefit of the doubt, but when you are dating someone older, that benefit of the doubt is not extended. She needs to know if you are capable, if you can lead. Now let us shift into the tactical, because awareness without action is useless. You need to know what questions to ask, what to evaluate, what to look for before you commit to this kind of dynamic. Decision making. The man who is constantly checking in, constantly seeking approval, that man is signaling that he is not ready to lead. Decision making. Can you plan a date without asking her to approve every detail? The man who is constantly checking in, constantly seeking approval, that man is signaling he is not ready to lead. Financial trajectory. She is evaluating whether you have your financial life together, but whether you are responsible, whether you have a plan. If you are still living paycheck to paycheck with no savings, no plan, that is a signal that you are not yet in a position to be a functional partner in the life she is building. Emotional steadiness. Can you remain calm when things do not go as planned? Can you handle conflict without becoming reactive? Can you receive criticism without spiraling? She is observing how you handle stress, how you manage your emotions, how you respond to challenge. Those things predict whether you can be a stable partner. And if you fail those tests, if you become emotionally volatile, she is learning you are not ready. Here is the rule. Never enter a dynamic blindly. Ask the questions. Do the evaluation. Be honest about what you find. Because entering a relationship, hoping it will work out, hoping that love will overcome structural misalignment, hoping that your feelings will bridge gaps that are real and significant, that is not optimism. That is denial. And denial, in the context of relationships, is just delayed pain. Now let us talk about confidence, because this is perhaps the single most important variable in determining whether a relationship with an older woman can work. Dating older women requires internal security. If you are seeking validation from her, if you need her approval to feel good about yourself, the dynamic will collapse quickly, because a woman with experience can detect insecurity immediately. And insecurity in a man is one of the least attractive qualities that exists. Not because there is something wrong with being insecure, but because insecurity makes everything harder. If you seek validation, the dynamic collapses. When you are seeking validation, you are not in the relationship as an equal. You are in the relationship as a supplicant. You are there to get something: approval, affirmation, proof that you are enough. And that need changes the entire power structure. It puts her in the position of judge. It puts you in the position of someone being judged. And that asymmetry is exhausting, and it kills attraction. Contrast this, seeking approval versus standing firm. The man who is seeking approval is reactive. He adjusts his behavior based on her responses. He modifies himself to fit what he thinks she wants. He becomes a shapeshifter, and in doing so, he loses the very thing that might have made him attractive: his distinctness, his solidity, his sense of self. She has a career focus. She is not at the beginning where everything is uncertain and exploratory. She is established. She has responsibilities. She has ambitions that are real and specific. And those ambitions are not going to be put on hold because you need attention. She has built something, and she is not going to dismantle it to make space for you. You have to fit into the life she has built. And if you cannot, the relationship will not work. Can you integrate without losing identity? Can you adapt to her structure without erasing yourself? Because adaptation is necessary, but self-erasure is fatal. The man who loses himself trying to fit into her life becomes invisible, a supporting character in her story. And that invisibility breeds resentment. In him, because he has given up too much. In her, because she loses respect for someone with no boundaries, no distinct identity. Now let us look at the practical realities. Because older women often come with established lives, and integrating into those lives is not as simple as it sounds. She has financial structure. She owns property. She has retirement accounts. She has budgets and financial plans. If you are not at a similar level of financial organization, if you are still figuring out your finances, there is a gap. And that gap creates tension, not because money is everything, but because financial incompatibility is one of the most reliable predictors of relationship failure. The social circles. She has friends she has known for years, professional networks, community ties, and those circles are not going to reshape themselves to accommodate you. You are going to have to integrate into them. You're going to have to hold your own in those spaces. And if you cannot, if you are intimidated by her friends, if you do not fit socially, that is going to create strain. She has established routines. When you enter the relationship, you are entering that structure. You are not building together from scratch. You are adapting to something that already exists. And the question is, can you adapt without losing yourself? She has established routines. They wake up at a certain time. They work in a certain way. They spend their weekends in a certain rhythm. They have habits built over years that are not easily disrupted. When you enter the relationship, you are entering that structure. You are not building together from scratch. You are adapting to something that already exists. And the question is, can you adapt without losing yourself? She has social circles, friends she has known for years, professional networks, community ties, and those circles are not going to reshape themselves to accommodate you. You are going to have to integrate into them. You are going to have to be someone who can hold their own in those spaces. And if you cannot, if you are intimidated by your friends, if you do not fit socially, that is going to create strain. Are you choosing her because she is stable? Because she has her life together in a way that younger women do not? Because being with her feels like an escape from chaos and uncertainty? If the answer is yes, you need to ask, are you attracted to her? Or are you attracted to the stability she represents? Now let us address the philosophical question that sits underneath all of this. Why are you choosing her? Not what are you telling yourself, not what sounds good. Why are you actually choosing her? Are you choosing her because she is stable? Because she has her life together in a way that younger women do not? Because being with her feels like an escape from the chaos and uncertainty of dating people your own age? If the answer is yes, you need to ask a follow-up question. Are you attracted to her, or are you attracted to the stability she represents? Are you choosing her because she feels safe? Because she is less likely to play games, less likely to be flaky, less likely to create the kind of emotional drama that younger relationships often involve? If the answer is yes, the follow-up question is, are you choosing safety over passion? Are you settling into comfort rather than pursuing genuine desire? Are you choosing her because she admires your youth? Because being with someone younger makes her feel a certain way, and that feeling makes you feel valued? If the answer is yes, you need to recognize that you are being chosen for a quality that is temporary. Youth fades, and if the attraction is based primarily on that, what happens when the novelty wears off? Are you choosing her because she admires your youth? Because being with someone younger makes her feel a certain way, and that feeling makes you feel valued? If the answer is yes, you need to recognize that you are being chosen for a quality that is temporary. Youth fades, and if the attraction is based primarily on that, what happens when the novelty wears off? Are you choosing her because you admire her experience? Because you genuinely respect what she has built, what she knows, who she is? If yes, that is the best foundation. Because admiration can sustain a relationship in ways convenience cannot. But admiration requires that you see her clearly, not as a fantasy of maturity, but as a real person with real flaws. And if you can admire her in full view of those things, you are choosing for the right reasons. Now let us be fair. Let us talk about when it works, because it can work. And understanding the conditions under which it works is as important as understanding the risks. The first condition is clear timeline alignment. If you both want the same things on approximately the same time frame, marriage, children, relocation, whatever the significant variables are, then the structural friction we have been talking about is minimized. You are not fighting against misaligned priorities. You are moving in the same direction, and that alignment makes everything easier. The second condition is mutual respect, not performance of respect, not politeness masking resentment, genuine respect. She respects your capabilities, your judgment, your contributions. You respect her experience, her clarity, her boundaries, and that respect is not conditional on either of you being perfect. It is based on a realistic assessment of who each of you actually is. And it holds even when things are difficult. The first condition is clear timeline alignment. If you both want the same things on approximately the same time frame, marriage, children, relocation, whatever the significant variables are, then the structural friction is minimized. You are not fighting against misaligned priorities. You are moving in the same direction, and that alignment makes everything easier. The second condition is mutual respect, not performance of respect, not politeness masking resentment, genuine respect. She respects your capabilities, your judgment, your contributions. You respect her experience, her clarity, her boundaries, and that respect is not conditional on either of you being perfect. It is based on a realistic assessment of who each of you actually is, and it holds even when things are difficult. The fifth condition is no hidden power imbalance. She is not secretly condescending towards you. You are not secretly intimidated by her. Neither of you is keeping score. Neither of you is feeling like they are giving more than they are getting. The dynamic feels equitable, not perfectly balanced at every moment, but balanced over time. Here is the reframe. The age gap is neutral. It is not inherently good or bad. It is not inherently a problem or an advantage. It is just a structural variable. And like all structural variables, its impact depends on everything else in the system. If the other conditions are right, the age gap is irrelevant. If the other conditions are wrong, the age gap amplifies the problems. Structure determines success, not age. Now let us talk about the real risk, because there is one. And it is not the risk most men think about when they enter this kind of relationship. The biggest risk is not her age. It is not her experience. It is not her expectations or her directness or her clarity. The biggest risk is losing your growth phase trying to accelerate into hers. Let me explain what I mean. The fourth condition is a defined long-term vision. You both know where this is going, not in the sense of having every detail planned, but understanding the general trajectory. You know if this is heading toward marriage or not. You know if children are part of the picture or not. And those things have been discussed, agreed upon, and are being actively worked toward. The vision is not vague. It is specific enough that both of you can evaluate progress. She is most likely in a consolidation stage. She has already been through the growth phase. She has already done the exploration. She has already built the foundation. And now she is consolidating. She is refining. She is optimizing what she has already built rather than building something entirely new. But it is a different stage. The risk is this. When you enter a relationship with someone who is in a consolidation stage while you are still in a growth stage, there is pressure, subtle, often unspoken, but real, to accelerate your development to match hers, to skip steps, to finalize things that should still be exploratory, to commit to a version of yourself that you have not fully developed yet, because the relationship requires a level of stability that you have not yet earned. And if you do that, if you collapse your growth phase to fit into her consolidation phase, you will resent it later, not immediately, but eventually, because you will realize that you rushed through a period of your life that you needed to inhabit more fully. You will realize that you made commitments before you were ready. You will realize that you adapted yourself to fit her life rather than building a life that was genuinely yours. Here is the binary: growth stage versus consolidation stage. If you are in a growth stage, you should be growing, not pretending to have already grown, not performing stability that you do not actually have, not accelerating your timeline to match someone else's. If she is in a consolidation stage and you are in a growth stage, the mismatch is structural, and pretending it does not exist does not resolve it. It just delays the reckoning. Here is the statement: you must know where you are before you join someone else's trajectory. If you do not know where you are, if you have not done the work of understanding what stage of life you are in, what you actually need, what you are actually capable of, then you are not ready to join someone else's trajectory. You will just get pulled into their orbit, and their orbit might be beautiful, but it is not yours. And eventually, that will matter. Now we arrive at the end, and the choice is binary. You can chase the fantasy of maturity, enter, hoping her experience will make everything easier, and maybe, for a brief period, it will feel like that is working. But the fantasy always collides with reality. And when it does, you will discover you were not ready, that you entered something you did not understand. And by the time you realize it, you will have invested time and emotional energy you cannot get back. Or you can evaluate the structure realistically. Ask the hard questions. Assess whether you have the competence, the confidence, the direction this requires. Look clearly at where you are and where she is and evaluate whether those stages are compatible. Be honest about your timeline, your capacity, and if the evaluation reveals misalignment, walk away. Not because she is not amazing, but because the structure does not support what both of you need. Dating older women is not wrong. It is not something to avoid, but entering it without clarity is wrong. Entering without understanding the power dynamics is wrong. Entering without the internal security to hold your own is wrong. Because when you enter without those things, you are entering a dynamic where you are structurally disadvantaged. And that disadvantage will hurt both of you. Know your stage. Are you in a growth phase or a consolidation phase? Are you still figuring things out, or have you already figured them out? Are you building or optimizing? If you do not know the answer to that question, you are not ready for this. Know your leverage. What are you bringing to the dynamic that makes you appear? What competencies do you have? What resources? What emotional maturity? What direction? If you are bringing youth and nothing else, you do not have leverage. You have a temporary quality that will depreciate. And when it depreciates, what is left? I know your timeline. What do you actually want? Not in some vague, aspirational sense, in a concrete, specific sense. And does your timeline align with hers? If you do not know your timeline, you cannot evaluate alignment. And without alignment, the relationship is just two people moving in different directions, hoping that proximity is enough. It is not. Know your leverage. What are you bringing to the dynamic that makes you appear? What competencies do you have? What resources? What emotional maturity? What direction? If you are bringing youth and nothing else, you do not have leverage. You have a temporary quality that will depreciate. And when it depreciates, what is left? If you have that strength, this can be one of the most rewarding dynamics you will ever experience. But if you do not, it will be one of the most clarifying forms of failure you will encounter. And clarity, painful as it is better than confusion. So evaluate honestly, enter clearly, or do not enter at all.